We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
If you've tuned into any form of media over the last few weeks, you'll have no doubt heard of Putin's price hike. The federal government solved to state that the pain at the pump and at the grocery store is solely the fault of the Russian president. But is this just the spin? Who's really to blame for the rising costs across America? Well, to help us sift fact from fiction, we're joined by economist, author, and host of Swamponomics TV, Mr. Andrew Moran. Thanks for being here, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get straight to the base here, Andrew. Is this a Putin price hike or Bidenomics 101?
Well, I think if you want to get to the root causes of today's inflationary environment, you go back
as Kamala Harris is wont to do down at the southern border.
Or as what she recently said, we have to acknowledge.
Absolutely. Acknowledge. Let's acknowledge. All right, please continue.
Anyway, so if you want to get to the root causes of today's inflationary environment, you go back to the CARES Act under the Trump administration and the aftermath of pandemic, after the pandemic, $2.2 trillion. Then you go a year later with the American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion. You add that up, that's a lot of money being pumped into the economy. The second thing is the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve creates $8 trillion out of nowhere in a 2-year time span. That gets pumped into the financial system. But then you have the global supply chain crisis, which is exacerbating those inflationary pressures. On top of that, you have Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is providing so much intensity to the food and energy prices. So I think the root causes is Bidenomics, of course, or just Swamponomics, if I can plug my TV show there, and all the Washington establishment policies that have occurred since the pandemic started, and then you have everything else exacerbating those issues. So it's primarily Washington policy that's contributed to this environment.
Yes, so I want to delve into this a little bit because it seems to me that the Fourth Estate in particular, they're refusing to even acknowledge that it's the wealth of Washington or swamp policies that have led to this mountain and all that as far as I can tell, this tiny little added extra bit of inflation that comes from in the recent months. So this is less than 2 months of the war in Ukraine, and yet they're focusing entirely on the war in Ukraine causing the inflation, where anybody who's looked at a graph of the rising inflation can see that it has been the policies going forward that put it in this position. So what do they hope to achieve by deflecting from the policy base and focusing on Vladimir Putin?
Well, elections coming up, you have to have that narrative heading into the midterm elections saying, we didn't have any inflation until Putin's invasion of Ukraine. But it reminds me of a lot of the debate that leftists have. When I was making charts last night, I was thinking of a conversation a lot of leftists have about OSHA and providing all these regulatory safety for workers and companies. And everyone points to, once OSHA was established, you had declining workplace injuries prior to whatever year it was established. But if you look before those years, they were already coming down. So in this case, you have inflation was already climbing a lot higher before the invasion was happening. It's just you have to have this spin. I get it. It's politics. The Democrats have to look good. The White House looks good. I guarantee you, if Trump were in office, he would have done the exact same thing. So I can't really blame them. It's just, they're devoid of reality once again. And I would say that you and I predicted this a few months ago or a couple months ago on Ellen Radio, saying this was going to be the main theme over the next several months, saying Putin's price hike. And every time there's a statement coming out talking about the inflation of the economy, it's constant. They always add that tidbit, Putin's price hike. It reminds me of that book. I forgot the name of the book now. But with Soma, it was one of those tragedy.
Brave New World, Aldous Huxley.
Brave New World, yes. And they would have this brainwashing thing in the background. Kids would sleep repeating certain phrases so it would seep into their subconscious. Today, they're doing the exact same thing by constantly every news segment, press conference statement, always have that tidbit, Putin's price hike, and then people start believing it.
I believe Aldous Huxley called it the hypnopedic solution.
There you go. Yes, there you go. Perfect.
So let's dig into the inflation numbers a little. We're looking at 8.5% now. Now, let's be fair, that's enormous. That's striking. What areas of that what areas does that most impact, though?
Okay, so first I would say though that the 8.5%, I mean, that's the baseline. I mean, I guarantee you that if you consider all the other factors and once you consider how they calculate the inflation, it's at least double digits. Now, when it comes to the specific numbers, everything is up across the board. I mean, the only things that fell, and I noted in my breaking news piece, was that televisions fell, audio equipment, and that's pretty much it. Everything else that people rely on heavily, bread, milk, meat, automobiles, household insurance, those things climbed enormously once again in March. And if you want to think about it too, they always say Putin's price hike, but what does household insurance have to do with Vladimir Putin? Absolutely nothing. But that was up, more than 3% once again in March. So everything is up across the board, and this is what makes this inflation environment a lot worse than the one they had in the 1980s. That this is it's broad based. It's across the board. Every single thing in the economy is just rising, and it's not slowing down at all. And that's what's concerning, And then that's the debate many economists are having over the coming months. Has inflation peaked, or is it going to start? Or is next month's CPI report going to be higher again?
I want to bring up the dreaded R word. Now, this is starting to be whispered cautiously in many areas. Is a recession likely?
Yeah, so that seems to be a lot of the opinions of Wall Street. Goldman Sachs, they had a research note coming out saying we've raised our recession odds to 35%. Merck Research, they put it to 1 in 3 odds. I think it was Wells Fargo, they also put it at 33%. So the recession word is being talked about a lot, as much as stagflation. Is it going to happen? If you look at the Federal Reserve money supply data, which a lot of Austrians do to determine if a recession is coming or not, you actually see the money supply increasing once again. Not to the extent as was a few months ago, because Federal Reserve is quasi-tightening monetary policy. But overall, I mean, the odds of recession, you see, okay, so for example, a good data point happened last month when it came to consumer spending. Consumer spending actually fell 0.2%, suggesting that perhaps people are being concerned about inflation. So since the United States economy is 2/3 consumption, if consumers aren't spending as much as they were, before the inflationary crisis or in the aftermath of the pandemic, then of course you could have an economic downturn.
Yeah, another figure that I've been seen bandied around is that unemployment is under 4%, whereas inflation is over 4%, and that tends to create recessionary factors within the next within 2 years of those numbers happening. Is that something that you've heard?
Well, it's funny. There was actually another research note by another bank. My brain this morning. I'm sorry. Another bank said that okay, you have strengthening employment market. People are going back to work, but what difference does it make if inflation is at 8.5% and all your wage gains are being erased by this inflationary pressures? So yeah, I do. A lot of people say the labor market's strong, but what difference does it make if inflation is high as it is, and then you have the recession going on, and people are likely going to lose these jobs anyway. Plus, also too with the employment, if I may add one more point about employment, is that you're still short of the pandemic employment numbers, about 2 million jobs, and then you factor in underemployment to full-time employment. All these factors add up, and the employment market, yes, on the surface it's good, but then once you dive underneath those numbers, then you see some weakness occurring.
Employment markets built on sand. Andrew Moran, thank you ever so much.
Thank you for having me.
You're listening to Liberty Nation Radio, heard across the Radio America network from our flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC in Washington, D.C. Remember, you can tune in for Liberty Nation from 2 to 3 p.m. Sunday on KBKW, 103.5 FM, 1450 AM, the talk of Grays Harbor. Coming up later in the show, we talk Liberty with Scott Cosenza. But up next, we examine how Joe Biden and his administration have decimated America's international reputation. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fighting for freedom.
Daily tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I can
others.
do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Getting noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.